And so what Putin is hoping for is that even though he's suffering unbelievable casualties, and we're talking about 1,000 men are being killed, 1,000 Russian soldiers are being killed every day. But what he's hoping for is that we are going to tire before he does. And he thinks that because he's living in a dictatorship. In his dictatorship, there's nobody to vote him out. So he can impose the most extreme penalties on his own people. And even if we only experience 1/100th the pain in our democracies and our free media and so on, we're all tying ourselves up in knots saying, well, should we be carrying on supporting Ukraine? And that's his big bet, is that we're going to abandon Ukraine before he runs out of resources to continue this war.
And yet the year started with a more muscular America, more aggressive rhetoric, willing to intervene in Venezuela, talk about taking Greenland by force if necessary, and attacking Iran. How do you think this is being viewed inside the Kremlin?
Well, so on one hand, the Kremlin is dancing the jig. They're looking at this and saying, if America wants to take Greenland, why is anyone giving us a hard time about taking Crimea or Ukraine, whatever? That's one argument, one reason for them to celebrate. However, on the other hand, and this is very important, is that the American military operation to take Maduro was a spectacular success militarily for the Americans. To be able to go in, completely immobilize all of their defenses, grab the dictator, the illegitimate dictator of a rogue regime, take him out and not lose a single American life, that looks very powerful compared to Putin, who's been in his special military operation for 4 years and has lost over 1 million soldiers.
And what do you think that US intervention in Venezuela is actually having on Russia's relationships with that country and also with Iran?
Well, what the other downside for Putin is that he has a bunch of what I'd call client countries or allied relationships. There was Syria, there was Venezuela, there was Iran, and Putin lost Syria. He lost Venezuela as a client state. And we're in the middle of Iran. We don't know which way it's going to go. But if he loses Iran, again, the Americans did all this powerful stuff grabbing Maduro. Putin can't even seem to hold on to any of his allies, any of his client states, and it does make him look weak. It makes America look like a superpower. It makes Russia look like a failing regional power.
And do you think this US willingness to intervene will make other countries any bolder in other areas, for example, targeting Russian oil and its shadow fleet?
Well, it all depends on what Donald Trump is saying privately on phone calls to Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron or whatever. In one sense, by him going after the Venezuelan shadow fleet, which happens to also overlap with the Russian shadow fleet, Putin, again, he's being humiliated. On the other hand, we don't hear any announcements of Trump taking over and boarding shadow fleet boats belonging to Russia that have nothing to do with Venezuela. He's doesn't seem to be doing that at all. Now, there is one person who's dealing with the shadow fleet in his own special way, and that's Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And he is systematically immobilizing these ships as they sail into the Black Sea, and sometimes doing it outside of the Black Sea. And so I think that I think that's probably the most interesting strategy, is not what Keir Starmer or Emmanuel Macron is going to do, but what Zelensky is going to do going after these ships.
Because, for example, in the Times this week, Britain has identified, it's reported a new legal basis to seize illegal oil tankers with the Sanctions and Money Laundering Act, where ships are being deemed to be stateless. I mean, it seems extraordinary that this has not been explored before, and a bit baffling why these gaps are being used and can be exploited to keep the trade going.
Well, I mean, it's the Russians don't abide by any international law. For us to be sort of tying ourselves up into knots about whether it is or isn't subject to international law. If these are pirate ships, they're out in the middle of the sea. If we're going to be all lawyering up, we should just hand over the information to the Ukrainians and let them do their work, because they seem to be doing it a lot more effectively.
What about the ordinary Russian people at the moment? 4 years of war, how is that impacting their daily lives?
Well, they can't travel to. They used to be able to get on airplanes to Europe and vacation in the south of France and in Italy and all that kind of stuff. And I think the number of Schengen visas issued has gone down by like 90%. To the extent that they can get there, they can't travel directly. They got to go through all these different places. The Ukrainians are closing down the airspace in Russia all the time with drone attacks. So that the people over the holidays were stuck in airports, sleeping on the floor for hours because all the planes were canceled. You've got the Ukrainians blowing up systematically Russian oil refining capacity to make gasoline, and so they have gasoline shortages all over Russia. And then, of course, there's the absolute horrific genocide, I would say, of young people, Russian people. Putin has sent, according to the Ukrainian statistics, somewhere around 1.2 million young men have either been killed or permanently disabled through this war, and that's a lot of people. I mean, that's an unimaginable amount of people, and I can't imagine that everybody is not privately thinking that this has got to stop.
And there are reports also that violent crime in Russia is on the increase as well.
Yeah, well, so you have, to the extent that any of these guys come back home, they've been totally socialized to kill, to maim, kill, rape, dismember, do all sorts of other terrible things to the Ukrainians that they come across. And all of a sudden, these psychologically damaged people are, when they're done, if they are done, if they're not killed in action, are then coming back and doing the same thing in Russia. And Putin can't really be too attacking of them because they're the guys he needs on the front line ready to throw themselves into the meat grinder.
We used to talk of the US as being the policeman of the world, and you talked earlier about how the muscular action that Donald Trump's administration has shown, has actually shown the weaknesses in Putin's Russia. And a Russian state TV host is now calling for potential military action by Russia in Armenia and saying now's the time. He's saying to hell with international law and global order. Should Armenia be worried about this, do you think? Or do you think Russia is concerned about losing Armenia to the West?
Well, Russia already lost Armenia. So Russia was so stretched with all their ill-founded military action in Ukraine. They used to be the protector of Armenia against Azerbaijan. And Azerbaijan said, well, these guys are looking the other way. They're distracted. They're weak. They've sent their best people out. And so they took Nagorno-Karabakh in which was an Armenian enclave. And Armenia is now basically no longer confident of the relationship that they had with the Russians because they didn't they didn't shore up their end of the bargain. And so whatever this TV host is saying about this, it's gone. Armenia is no longer a Russian
but he's
client
actually
state.
Inciting Russia to take it back, to intervene. I mean, do you think that there are dangers in countries close to Russia by its willingness to? I mean, where would be next, for example?
Well, I mean, there's another thing going on which hasn't gotten a lot of media attention, but in Moldova, there's a disputed part of Moldova called the Transdniester region, and there's a whole group of Russian soldiers who have now been effectively surrounded. The Ukrainians and the Moldovans have surrounded them, and so they no longer have access to resupply, et cetera, and they may be in a difficult place. And so Russia is losing geopolitically in every other place. And by the way, one other thing is, in addition to losing their client states, if their whole reason for going into Ukraine was they claim NATO enlargement, that was one of the pretexts. Well, guess what? While they're fighting a war in which they've lost 1.2 million men of their own soldiers in Russia, Finland and Sweden have joined NATO, which is something that was completely unexpected and has gone completely against whatever their stated goals for this special military operation.
Thank you for watching Frontline with me, Kate Gerbeau. For more on the war in Ukraine, please subscribe to this channel. And for the latest news and updates, you can also head over to The Times' YouTube channel. You can also read the latest on thetimes.com. And remember, if you want exclusive updates and content, sign up for a membership right here. For now, though, thanks for watching.